Let your spirit run free along the old Black Nile.
Good afternoon, Washington, D.C. This is Tony Browder welcoming you to another edition of the Browder File Show, and I'm always thankful for you all choosing to come along with me as we discuss history and culture and things that are good for you and will help make you a better person. I trust that everyone is recovering from all the festivities, all the food and sports and arguments and everything that you were engaged in over the last week. We are now officially into the holiday season, or what some people refer to as the holiday season. This is the time where we are experiencing more nighttime energy than daytime energy. It's a time when we should be going inside. We should be focusing on our thoughts, our emotions. We should be focusing on spirit and healing ourselves as we prepare for a new year, as we prepare for a new season. But we live in a society where we are programmed to do things that are antithetical to good sensibilities. Instead of being still and focusing on our environment and where we are and what's important for us and our well-being, we're directed to focus our attention on gorging ourselves on food and sports and spending money we don't have to buy gifts for people we don't like. The hopes that maybe if we buy them enough gifts, if we spend enough money on them, they may like me more. And we neglect the persons that we really should be caring about, not in the selfish sense, ourselves. I have taken note that this season, the lead up to winter, and particularly the time frame between Christmas and New Year's, is when the medical industry, doctors and hospitals report the greatest incidence, the highest incidence of heart attacks, of strokes, of illnesses. And they've been saying that many of those illnesses, many of those deaths can be directly attributed to the increased pressure that this season brings on us, and that many people spend a lot of time eating more than they would normally eat, being involved in a host of activities that they would not normally be involved in. And you couple that with the cold weather, being in the house more, not getting as much sunshine, and all these things add up and impact the health of many people, impact the physical well-being of many people. And this is true. It's been true in my instance. I can look back on my life for the past 17, 18 years. And the two times that I've been hospitalized have been during this season. And fortunately, I was able to get back on my feet and recover because of approaches to health and well-being that have been a part of my life for well over 50 years. So I'm pleased today to have a guest who is duly qualified to talk about health, physical health and spiritual health and mental and emotional health, as well as the foods that we eat that enhance our health and our quality of life. We're going to be talking about holistic approaches to health, living, and our overall well-being. And my guest today is Dr. Amen, who is no stranger to those of you in the DMV, no stranger to those of you who live around the Takoma Park area of the DC and Maryland community. He is a physician's physician, and by that I mean he's a physician that physicians go to when they want to get well, and that says something about the art of healing, right? So, Dr. Amen, welcome to the Browder File Show. How are you doing, brother?
Greetings. Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm glad to have you. And when I refer to you as a physician's physician, that comes straight from the horse's mouth because I had a health experience that we may talk about a little bit later on in the show. But 3 years ago, I had a health experience. And I was talking to a couple of friends of mine who were physicians. and one of them referenced you as someone that they had gone to during times when they were having some physical challenges. And it's always important for me to know who the people who you trust and look to for guidance, who they go to, because not everybody is capable of doing everything themselves. So, welcome, and just share with our guests a little bit about your background in the medical profession, what you do, and some of your other areas of interest, and we'll jump into it and discuss holistic approaches to health and living.
Thank you. So, I tell people my medical career started when I was 10 years old. I went out the house one day without my skateboard and got to the store, walked out of the store, walked into the street, and I got run over by this car.
Mm.
And I remember my mom coming. She sort of ran over, looked at me. I was a couple blocks away from my house. Someone must have called her, and she passed out. And
Mm.
the ambulance people kind of handled me a little bit rough. And I must have passed out because I woke up in the ER to the doctor screaming, yelling, ranting. Where's that little N that ran into my son's truck? Right? And so, so at the time I did this social studies project. It was called Negroes on the Road to Freedom. And I had won the in Louisiana you have parishes and then the regional for the elementary division. And this was about a month before I went to the state, right? So I spent a couple weeks in the hospital and then I got to the state and my face was all scarred up. And so I won the children's division at the state level, and there was this they went around and interviewed us for the main prize. And so he asked me, what happened? I said, man, I got hit by a car, and I told him the story, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to be a EMT, a medic,
Mm.
because things like that should never happen to people, right? The idea that I walked out the house to go get a case for my parents, right, was ridiculous, right? So lo and behold, 10 years, so I was 10 at that point. By the time I was 19, when I walked out the door to go to school, I did my undergrad at Xavier in New Orleans. And all of this had been forgotten. And but my first semester there, I had a 3.5. My second semester, I came up with a 1.5. My parents were like, "Hey, son, you need to come back home." And it just so happened that the local university, University of Louisiana, had opened up a EMT, a paramedic program. So I ended up doing the medic program. And then right when I graduated, I was 20 years old. With that, I went back to the city of New Orleans and worked as an intermediate level EMT for 4 years. And so I did a year on their private kind of transport to sort of understand the workings of the elder care system, the nursing home system. I spent a year at Carroll Hospital, the largest private hospital in Louisiana, in their emergency room as an ER tech. And then I did 2 years on the streets of New Orleans from 89 to 91 as a medic for the city of New Orleans. And that was really, I mean, this was during the crack epidemic, right? So, when I think about warfare and PTSD and all the things that I witnessed, that those years made me, when people look at me and be like, man, how you get like the way you are? I'm like, well, I've seen a lot. And during those years, I went to school full time during the day. I worked full time at night. And I was sort of a full-time partier outside of that. But those years allowed me to really see what was going on in the medical system. And even today, I argue, I'm like, crack destroyed a lot of lives, but the
Absolutely.
medical side of stuff, the diabetes and hypertension, and it's actually a much bigger contributor to I guess the demise of Black folk, what we're doing over the plate than the drugs and stuff on the street. Um, and I've experienced both. I've gone to houses with calls where, it felt good being a medic, right? You're doing all this heroic stuff. Somebody's hurting, you get them to the hospital, they get the help they need, or they're having an asthma attack, you give them a respirator treatment, they come out of it. They're in a sickle cell crisis. But what I did notice was we never gave people, like we would get these repeat calls that all of my white partners. So as a medic with the city of New Orleans, I was on most of my shifts, I was the only uh, brown person on the shift. So you had this EMS system where all of these people who lived in suburbs came into town
Mm.
to treat the people. And, some of them really meant well, but for the most part, and some of them were compassionate, but really they looked at Black folk as if they were monkeys or something, right? Because I think the ignorance level in New Orleans at that time was just so high that it frustrated me, it frustrated them. But we
So
weren't
what do you
offering
mean when you say
solutions.
the ignorance level? Are you talking about people not taking adequate care of themselves, which resulted in them
Yes,
being ill and
yes,
having
what I mean
a
by
medical emergency and calling you guys to come in and
yes.
treat them? Hmm.
Well, so we could say on the streets, right? I remember picking up a brother once, you know, he got shot in the chest. We picked him up. The second time we picked him up, he was shot in the back, so he was paralyzed. Third time, someone just walked up to him in the wheelchair and put a bullet in his head. So I'm like, at what point could there have been a conversation that could have changed the outcome of this brother's life? So that's the street. But on the medical scene was the asthma attacks, right? You go in someone's house and they might have a glass of milk and some glow in the dark looking cookies right next to the bed while they can't breathe.
So what's wrong with the milk and the glow in the dark cookies? What are you trying? Are you trying to say that there's an association between what people eat and the quality of their lives?
Yes, clearly. And we never talked about solutions for them. Like, hey,
Mm.
brother, if you didn't drink this big glass of milk, when the weather is changing, maybe you wouldn't come down with an asthma attack. Maybe it wouldn't shift you over the deep end, right? With sickle cell crisis, much the same, except we really, in many cases, we looked at people who had sickle cell and were in crisis as if they were like uh, uh, looking for drugs for pain, right? Just like they were more drug addicts than they were actually in pain. We never gave them solutions to help reduce the number and amount of crises that these people had, right? So it was always this heroic approach, but we never really gave people solutions. So in my own life, I remember, man, I walked out of the ER one day. I saw this man and I said, "Oh, I know you from somewhere." And he said, "No, I don't know you from anywhere." I said, "Man, I'm sure I know you from somewhere." And so finally he asked me where I worked. I said, "I work right here in the ER." And he said, "Well, I'm coming into the hospital today to show these people that I don't need their help anymore, right? I'm off of all the meds." But he said, but 3 months ago, I coded and you all brought me back to life in this ER. And that's where I knew him from. So for one, brother, I had never seen anybody that we done CPR that survived. So for him to be coming back to the hospital to show them that he was off of all the drugs just floored me, right? I couldn't believe it. He's like, "I changed my lifestyle. I'm good. I'm coming here today to show them I'm good." And
Mm.
so that sparked something in me. And at the time, I remember, struggling with some health issues, and they were minor, like hemorrhoids and some other stuff. And my father was like, "Son, you just need to eat more cornflakes." Right?
Cornflakes.
So, so, which may have had some truth to it given the diet that I had at the time, but that's not ideal fiber at all. But that sparked in me this urge to change my lifestyle. And once I changed my lifestyle and became empowered in that way, I understood the power of natural medicine. Like,
Mm.
and getting away from the heroic kinds of, the other side of what I didn't say, like working in the ER, man, one of the docs that I worked with was real racist, right? And I watched him on a couple of occasions. I can say kill someone, but that's what it amounted to because he denied people health care based on their insurance status, right?
Mm.
Why did they come here? They should have gone to Charity Hospital, put them back on the ambulance, and get them to Charity. And by the time that happened, they were gone. And I just thought no one should have that power, right? That's not up to him. As a doctor, he should have just treated those people and left the financials to the hospital. So,
Well, he was
anyway,
in
brother,
violation of the Hippocratic Oath, right?
exactly. So for me, brother, all of that, I ended up dipping out. I actually took a 3-year meditation hiatus in a community, which was beautiful, but it allowed me to one, brother, let me in the meantime, let me thank you. I have to, brother. So I think it was 1988. I read your the Browder Files.
89. It came out in
89.
89. Hmm.
But 88, 89, the Browder Files, the autobiography of Malcolm X, brother. I grew up as an ex-slave. That was, when I mentioned Negroes struggling on the road to freedom, my social studies project, right? But in the community that I grew up in,
Where'd you grow up?
Opelousas, Louisiana. You
And
know the
Opelousas, give us a
town.
frame of reference. Opelousas is how far from New Orleans, for
Yeah,
example?
Opelousas is about 120 miles from New Orleans.
Okay.
So I actually met you in Opelousas underneath the carport of Father AJ McKnight. And but I had read your book a few years before that. But brother, I want to thank you for that information gave me the cultural self-esteem that I needed, and I just can't say how important. I felt betrayed. I felt like, how could they have given us this garbage when this is the truth? Right?
Hmm.
And having that is so empowering. So thank you for the work, Dr. Ben, Dr. Dio, Dr. Ben Sertima, Dr. Clark, all those brothers, brother, I think the level of cultural self-esteem that we are missing without the information that you all have brought forth has been a detriment to the community. But for me, that information transformed my life in a way where, I eventually found meditation. And meditation definitely transformed my life in a
Hmm.
deep way,
Well,
right?
how did you get into medicine, man? So meditation allowed you to ground yourself
Right, but I
and
switched. So
find your
I
path in
yeah,
life.
so I went to a school called Bastyr University, which is a 4-year medical school in Seattle that specializes in naturopathic medicine.
Hmm.
And so, and then I spent there from 94 to 98, and then I came here in 1998, and I've been practicing here ever since.
So, what's the advantage do you find in a naturopathic approach to medicine as opposed to the traditional approach to medicine or any other approaches to medicine? Why did you focus on that aspect of healing?
So I feel there should only be medicine. Let me say that up front, right?
Mm.
I think things have been fragmented for a while on purpose, but in general, to answer your question, I spend a lot of time with people. I sit and I talk to people on my first interview for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I kind of understand what's going on with people. So the idea is to get to the root of what's going on, to treat the whole person, to I think once you understand where somebody is, there's a difference in how you might be able to help people and
Absolutely.
determining like the changes that they might be able to make on their own and the kind of help that they might need. Um, but most of all, I think, is the belief in the healing power of nature and hence in the healing power of the human body, right? We rely on Western medicine in the same way that we sort of rely on something like religion, like Christianity, right? Meaning, if I got Jesus in my back pocket, I could do all kinds of crazy stuff and then just say the name at the end. And that's not how it's supposed to work, but that's how it's end up working for a lot of people, right? So with natural medicine, we empower people and hold people accountable. And I think when people shift and make changes and they get the benefits of those shifts and changes, then they become empowered in their own health. And that is something that the Western medical system, in the way that they function in just getting rid of a disease, or you got it or you don't, and like there's not much. You're relying on that system, on medicines, on drugs, on surgeries, right? Which, granted, given where people are when they get something, those things may be necessary, but ideally we want to transition people back to living life with as little of that as possible,
Well,
right?
brother, let me say this. I remember you've been around for a while, as you said. You've been in the area
Yes,
since '98, and you made the rounds on a number of local radio shows over the years. And I recall you saying over a year ago, I recall you talking about issues within the medical industry, and you gave a history of how John D. Rockefeller was instrumental in structuring the current uh, medical system as it exists now, with medical schools funding medical schools and their relationship with the
right,
pharmaceutical companies. Can you
right,
can you run through that briefly and share that information, that overview with our listeners?
right. So before 1909, there was actually 116 medical schools in the US. So with the advent of oil came the advent of some pharmaceutical drugs, right? So Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, um, one of them had hired a man named Flexner, as I think he ran the Rockefeller Foundation, but J.P. Morgan hired Flexner's brother, who was an educator, to do this report on medical schools. And they looked at John Hopkins as the ideal medical school, right? And that was the basis of his interpretation of what was going on. So in 1909 so Rockefeller clearly had his intentions, right? Let's put that out there. So in 1909, Flexner comes out with the Flexner report. And what that report did was it closed more than half of the medical schools. And within the
On what
Black
grounds?
community,
What grounds?
on the grounds that they were not scientific. And
Mm,
granted, there were some things going on in medicine that were not scientific, but it's not what we think in terms of the way that we accuse natural medicine of being witchcraft today, right? When you go to,
mm,
oh, this is unscientific, this is that. No, bleeding people. George Washington died because somebody took 2 or 3 pints out of his arm of blood, right?
mhm,
So, using mercury, using heavy metals, those were the sorts of things that were poisoning people. But this was not coming from the people who were doing natural medicine. This was
mhm,
coming from another aspect of conventional. So,
mhm,
yes, they needed to get rid of that. And so, in the Black community, there were 7 Black medical schools. And in the end, we were left with just Meharry and Howard as medical schools, right? And so, which meant that Black folk only represented, I think, 1.5% of medical doctors, and that brought that down to 1%, and that stayed that way almost until like the early 2000s, when it came up to about 5%, right? But in terms of the population, that means there's been a lot less doctors who understood African Americans and were able to serve Black people, and all the ways that we get dismissed and just misunderstood. If you don't understand somebody, it's hard to treat them. right? And if you don't,
Or if you don't want to understand
right,
somebody, right?
right,
Yeah, that's true. There's a book that a sister wrote a number of years ago called Medical Apartheid, where she um, wrote or documented numerous instances where there is a dual medical system. There's a system of healthcare for one segment of the population and sick care for another segment of the
right,
population. Yeah.
right. So, you know what? Let me say one other thing while we're talking about that is that, you know, at the same time, 1909 and 1910, because in the end, you know, food has become the biggest obstacle to cure in our life. And I would say, you know, on a physical level. I think on another level, in terms of what we're going to talk about a little bit later, is just, you know, as when you don't have substance, then you're looking for that substance through stuff on the outside, right? And so this we all have developed a sort of overconsumptive attitude that is like culminates during the so-called holiday season in terms of over shopping. And you know, I was walking to the Apple store the other night and I just happened to go on Friday. I didn't think about Black Friday, but on my way there I was listening to NPR and they were saying like every minute, it was around 7 o'clock, so they said every minute until midnight we're averaging $16 million a minute in expenditures
In
in the
sales,
US. Can
$16
you
million dollars a minute.
imagine? 16 million a minute.
Hmm.
And it was the biggest hype. So, but going back to in 1909 was also two Germans, Haber and Bosch, came up with the Haber-Bosch reaction. And the Haber-Bosch reaction was really a warfare thing because it allowed us to take nitrogen from the atmosphere and make nitrogen, which nitrogen, of course, we use for bombs, right? So, but that same nitrogen, when they got done with warfare, has been applied to all of the agricultural fields across the world at this point, right?
In what regards? Infusing nitrogen into the soil
Right.
to
So plants
enrich the
need
soil?
nitrogen, they need phosphorus, and they need potassium as the basic, what we call macronutrients for plants to grow. So when you have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plants grow and look just fine. So the issue is, a little bit of local history. So here in Maryland, the land is much different than even the land right north of the Pennsylvania line because Maryland was a slave state. And because it was a slave state, land was just looked at for usury, right? There was no
Mhm.
regeneration of the land,
Right,
right?
right,
And
right.
tobacco was a crop that lasted about 11, 12 years. And then you had to do something, it wore the land out. So, you know, one of the places I farm is up in Montgomery County around Olney, and it's the farmer that I work with is an old Quaker, right? And he's like, oh, you know, my grandfather owned all this land, and he had all these slaves, and the beauty
Wait,
around,
wait, wait. A Quaker who owned slaves? No.
yeah, the Quakers in Montgomery County owned slaves,
All
but.
right. You
So
give
the
me a history
bragging
lesson.
point is that they released their slaves in 1815, right? Which was what, 50 year or whatever before slavery
Before
ended.
emancipation.
But
But that explains
tobacco,
that explains Benjamin Franklin there, because Franklin was a Quaker, but he also had enslaved several Africans. So
right.
okay,
So they
there's a
released
history
their
that's worth
slaves
investigating.
early. But I question whether they released their slaves early because they had good hearts or if they released their slaves early because the land had been worn out,
Mm.
right? And so, and they just ran out of place to grow. And so what happened after that was between 1815 and the advent of this Haber-Bosch, the artificial nitrogen, was bat guano, right? They were mining bat
Mm.
guano from these caves down in Peru or off the coast of Peru, South
Hmm.
America. And even that was the reason for the C&O Canal was as farmers had worn out the fields, they just moved west, right? From up in Maryland all the way down to South Carolina, Georgia, the farmers, the slave owners just moved their plantations west as they wore this land out.
It's
So
moving westward to access new land
new
to
land,
wear out. Okay,
right?
okay, okay.
So where I'm getting at with this is all this worn out land. And then in 1910, they started with just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So when you go into the grocery store now, you look at all the beautiful produce, but there's no smell to it. There's
Mm,
not a lot of taste to it because it was grown with just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, right? And probably in a way where those things were isolated, and then all of the other macro and micro nutrients like calcium, magnesium, all of your zinc, copper, manganese, all of those micronutrients that you need, they're not really there, right? So when we talk about nutrient density, right? Nutrient dense plants contain all of the nutrients, not just NPK, right?
hmm
So in essence, a disease like diabetes, which is like overfed but undernourished. So on the outside, they may be obese, they may be overfilled, but on the inside, on the cellular level, they look like one of those children from one of those Ethiopian commercials from the early 80s, right?
Sure.
They're starving,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the cellular level. So I'm eating all of this stuff, but on the inside, I'm not getting completely fulfilled, right? Which is sort of a metaphor for our society and the level of consumerism that we have.
Brother, look, let me
Go
stop you
ahead.
for a moment. We're at the bottom of the hour. I want to inform my listeners that you're listening to WPFW. You're listening to the Browder File Show, and my guest today is Dr. Amen, a naturopathic physician. We're discussing holistic approaches to health and living, and right now he's drilling down on food. There's an old statement that I remember hearing years ago: "Let food be your medicine." And let food be your medicine. And there's another part to that which I'm forgetting right now. But you've gotten into growing food in
Right.
order to heal your body on the inside.
So some of my interest in growing food is definitely ancestral, but from a doctor perspective, right? What I've noticed since I practiced in the 80s, when I changed my diet, there was sort of this continuum, right? Where you give up the pork, you give up the beef, the red meat, then you eat chicken and fish, and then maybe you transition to a more plant-based diet. Um, I think all of that has been turned over on its head in the current agricultural system. Pork might be some of the best meat you could get these days. and so I think some of the worst meat is probably going to be turkey, and then the chicken is right behind that. And
And
so, right,
why do you say that? Why do you say that? Because that
because
runs
of the
contrary
way
to
that, and
everything that
I
I've heard
know it
about
sounds
food.
like it doesn't make any sense, right? So when we talk about nutrient density, right, what they've done, and all the games that they play with all of this, right? Because when you go and you buy some Purdue chicken, it'll say no hormone free and all this stuff, but what you really has is a chicken that was raised solely on grains, and its lifetime was 42 days. 42 days. Think about that. From hatch to finish in 42 days. That's what's going on with chicken, right? So you got this bird that ate grain and it completely overgrew, and you're going to eat it, and you expect not to overgrow in the same way that this bird
Mm,
overgrew,
mm. Okay.
right? So part of that is genetics, but it's mostly food, right? In the way that the chick, meaning part of it is they've raised these birds to kind of overgrow. I mean,
Sure, sure. Pumped them with hormones and
but they
and
don't
all
pump
of
them with hormones. That is there's no hormones in bird production. That's why that label that I'm talking about that says hormone free, they're fooling
ah.
people.
Got it, got it,
There's
got it,
no
got it, got it.
hormones.
Because
It's
there
all
was an issue when the chickens were given growth
yeah,
hormones, female growth hormones, and the people who consumed the chicken, or
but
the
it
young
was the
people who
eggs.
consumed the
That's
chicken.
eggs. That's eggs. That's different than chicken. They give hormones for them to produce more eggs. They give all of them antibiotics,
Okay.
right? So you'll see antibiotic free, hormone free. So you have chickens are 42 days. Beef is 6 months. I grew up in the country. Cows, you normally harvest them after 2 years, not after 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Pigs is something like 4 to 6 months. So they're just overgrowing everything on this food. So when we look at the field, when you travel around Maryland and you see, corn, soy, whatever's out in the fields agriculturally, most of that below Baltimore, all of it is going over to the Eastern Shore to serve as chicken food, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so, but let me wrap this up about the food because what we're dealing with is a nutrient density issue. If you don't put all those minerals back in the soil, then eventually you get more and more depleted. So people are eating the same food, it just doesn't have the same amount of nutrient density. And we're now, the Haber-Bosch reaction happened in 1910, so we're 100 and something years of just that on the soil. There's not many farmers that we go through adding rock dust, remineralizing the soil, right? Organic farmers not only add things like minerals. People know compost, right? Humus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you're good, you also add all the minerals back as well as the humus. Kemet, civilization. Mesopotamia, they say, happened a little bit before Kemet on the Euphrates, but the flood that happened on the Euphrates was different in that it did not coincide with the growing season, right? Kemet is the longest lasting civilization in the world because you had the Nile River, which got mineralized water coming off of the Blue Nile, which came out of Ethiopia,
Lake Tana in
out of the
Ethiopia.
high mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And that merged with this humus rich river that came out of Africa,
Out of Uganda, the
out
White
of
Nile that came
Uganda.
out of Uganda.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So but the White Nile was anything but white. It was muddy. It was
Mm-hmm.
the muddy part of the Nile. So this muddy part, which represented the humus, and the mineralized part, which came out of Ethiopia, that flooded this plateau, which allowed for this stable civilization to happen over thousands of years, right? And it really only ended when they built the Aswan Dam,
True.
right?
That's
They
true.
stopped that process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, but they had nutrient dense food for all them years. We do not have nutrient dense food. So, the fact that we have to eat, I think, apples, right? You have to eat 20 apples today to equal a half of an apple from 100 years ago, right?
So,
Think
so
about
hold on.
that.
Let's back up for a second.
Think
You're
about that.
really impressing upon me the value of nutrient dis dense food. How do you know, or where can you get nutrient dense food?
Brother, that's why I grow my own, to be honest, because even in organic farming, if you don't know the practices that certain farmers are using, there's nothing that guarantees that. And the concept of regenerative agriculture is new, right? Maryland brags about being the first no-till state from 1980s, but really they achieved that with the use of chemicals, with glyphosate,
Mm.
right? Which is to not disturb the soil so much. So, but real nutrient dense food comes from remineralizing, having all of the humus, making sure you're focusing on biological farming instead of chemical farming, right? And so there's few farmers who do that, but in general, to answer your question, from your local farmers market, it's much better to buy from local farmers than to even the organic standards, because the organic standards have moved up to the national level.
Mm.
It is so much more difficult to ensure that you're actually getting anything, and there's a lot of fraud in the food system. So to even
Okay.
know that what you're getting what is said on the label. But let's go back. Ultra processed foods is something that they like the corn. They take the corn and they isolate 5 or 10 things into basic substances from the corn. So ultra processed foods is you take a product and you you separate it into isolates, right? You isolate different components, and then you add those different components back together. So you could have a candy bar or a tortilla in a store, and it's got 100 ingredients from 100 different places in that candy bar, right? And so, but you're basically taking these ingredients, you're isolating them away from each other, and then you're gluing them back together using stuff like xanthan gum and glycerin and all these different things that stick it together, and you're adding salt and sugar to it. And that is the current state of food science. So when you go into the store and you walk down them shelves and you pick up any box on any aisle, and the ingredients are almost the same, corn and soy and a few other things, but it's all glued together with these
So what happens when you break
our
foods
body
apart
doesn't
and then
know
put them
what to
back
do with
together? What
that. Our
happens?
bodies don't know what to do with that. And so this is the current state of metabolic syndrome that we're in, right? That stuff is completely, so what we have was called the gut microbiome, which actually is the largest part of our immune system, is right there in our gut, in the gut microbiome. It does not know how to process all that stuff. So I teach people what real food is, right? In the same way that we're talking with the meats, it has to be grass finished. With the chicken, it needs to be pastured. Organic vegetables, hopefully from a farmer that's using regenerative farming techniques. That's the basics that we start people with. So that old concept, even plant-based, right? If you go plant-based and you're living on
Mm,
beyond this and fake that, I've had brothers coming here who've been vegan for years, who have cholesterols through the roof, who have
mm,
like hearts clogged up and all this other stuff, and they're doing this plant-based. Our bodies don't know what to do with that because all that fake meat and fake cheese stuff is ultra processed foods.
mm,
No
mm.
matter if it says organic or not, it's
So,
still.
so, so look. I mean, you dropping
So
you
I'm
dropping a
dropping
lot
a
of
lot.
bombs on us this afternoon. What practical steps can you give our listeners now to eat healthy so
So
that they
reading
can live
labels,
healthy?
if there's more on that label, and then you start seeing like, xanthan gums or some kind of glue in there, to stay away from that.
Mm,
You want simple labels, right? And they're doing it, there's a book out, I forget the gentleman who wrote it, but it's called Ultra Processed People. And
mm,
he's European, he's English, right? But the book is beautiful, and then it spells out all of what's going on in the food system and how we're being manipulated by the food science people, right? This is all calculated, you
of
know.
course.
And there is a set of people who think that we could just destroy the planet and move to another world, but I think we're in earth bodies and we're earth beings.
Hmm.
So, brother, I know you didn't want to just talk about this.
No, 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 no. This is good. I mean, you have my interest, but what I do want to do is leave our listeners with a path toward better
So,
health as we
so
move
what
into
I
the new
tell
year.
people is, some of these places, chicken places, the one that I see where cars line up
Oh
down the
yeah,
block, you
yeah.
know, to get in there, there's like 150 ingredients just in the bun.
Mm.
That's not so we have to stop getting manipulated by those places. The faster it is, the worse it is for our health. Usually I tell people, with the current state of metabolic syndrome, if you eat protein, do protein and vegetables, leave out the starchy stuff in the meals. Um, because a lot of the starchy stuff is where you get the most ultra processed foods from. So get some vegetables, maybe get a little bit of protein. I'm plant-based. I've been vegan, but honestly, to do a healthy vegan diet now is just as hard. And I don't think it matters from a metabolic point of view. I'm vegan for spiritual reasons, for other reasons. I mean, in the beginning, it definitely helped my health, but there's challenges that come up. Like where you
Sure.
get your omega 3s from, where you get all your B vitamins from, you can become more deficient. So you got to be on point when you do a plant-based diet, right? It can be done, but you definitely got to be more on point when you do it. So I don't
Well,
really push people in that
well,
way.
let me ask you this along that line, because there is more medical evidence coming out now that people will live a healthier life if they're plant-based. But the truth of the matter is, a majority of people in this country are going to eat their meat. They're going to eat their chicken. So
Right. So I,
what advice can you give folk who are going to eat their meat, who are going to eat their chicken? You mentioned before
again,
it,
yeah,
it should be grass-fed
finished,
meat.
finished, grass finished, not fed, because that's where the labels, brother, they play with these labels so much. So
Sure.
at the end is grass finished.
Now, what does that mean? Grass finished. What?
That means that, so it's the same with the cows, except they know that 6 month cow can only happen because of grain. Cows are not supposed to be eating grain, they're supposed to be eating grass,
Okay.
right? So when I grew up in the country, we had cows. We had them out in the back field. They would eat some of the weeds. So before we slaughtered them, we would actually put them up in the barn and feed them clean hay or feed them grain for like a week. They call that fattening them up, right?
Sure.
But that process, that was only a week of that animal's life. It wasn't
Hmm.
its whole life.
Got it.
So those cows, by the time they die, they have metabolic syndrome, which is the same thing as is animal diabetes, right?
Mm.
So you're eating an animal that's sick. So the grass finished is what we want. And then with eggs, it's called pastured, which, so even with the free range, it started with free range, but then they just made legal free range a cage that was a little bit bigger. All right. And so, so
A
there's
longer
tricks.
chain, a longer
So
leash, huh?
now it's pastured, right? They got
Mm. Of
all these games that they play with people.
course.
So and once Whole Food, and actually Walmart is the number one distributor of organic food in the US. Once
Is that?
Walmart got into the game, all the standards went down,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because all those people sit on the boards, right?
Mm.
So, brother, that's where we're at. So you asked about the winter solstice, right?
So look, let's do this because I'm monitoring the time. This is the Browder File show here on WPFW. It's 5:47, so I only got about 5 to 7 more minutes with you,
Okay.
and before this show is over. And I would like for you to give our listeners some steps, some 1, 2, 3 steps that they can use during this season in order to start 2026 on the good foot.
Right.
What are 1, 2, 3 things that they could be doing? And then I want you to talk about your practice and let folk know where you are if they
Right.
want to come and consult with you.
Brother, I think you, before, we started, you know, in Western society, we have gotten away, like we're afraid, right? And the biggest fear that most of us had is the fear of death. And
Absolutely.
I think that is because the concept of rebirth is not embedded into this system. It's this, you have one life and then it's up or down, right? Eternal this or eternal that, right? And that's a myth. It doesn't happen in nature. In nature, you have the fall, which is death. It happens in the fall with the falling of the leaves on the trees and everything. But starting at the winter solstice, you have the concept of rebirth, which is, life is a bunch of cycles, right? Over
Absolutely.
and every year is a new cycle. And so the concept from a spiritual perspective is that we connect the heart to the mind and we live our purpose. That is how we bring the energy of the divine into our life, and our life becomes effortless, right? And so, in order to do that, we need to, one, stop being so reactive, which means we have to meditate. We have to be able to step outside of ourselves and realize why we can't make that spiral go up. Why does the spiral why did I experience this year exactly what I experienced
Mm.
last year? So when you talked about all the death and stuff at this time of the year, some people, they haven't changed anything and they don't see how they can do anything different.
Mm.
And so that's it. They give up. And because you have to have a vision. This time of year is a time to commune. It's a time to get that insight into how I can live this new year differently. But it's the process of being reborn, right?
Hmm.
Which it happens on a micro scale. And so, and then, but it's reflection, it's committing ourselves to new habits, it's being able to identify the old habits that don't serve us and let it go. The Halloween is, in that spirit of death is, we say Halloween, oh, it's a pagan thing. No, actually, Halloween started as a celebration. It is actually a day to help our set souls transition, all those people that were attached unhealthily to something in this world, whether it was a house, a habit, a person, to help them transition. That's what these ghosts are. People who were attached and they can't let go. They can't
Hmm.
do the Pert Em Haru, right? They
Right.
can't keep going, right?
Well, look,
So,
well,
so
let's do this because I got 2 minutes left with
okay.
you. I got 2 minutes left with
Yep.
you, and then we're gonna have to cut it off. But two things. I got a question here: is what is the value of seedless fruit? Is seedless fruit any good?
Run, run. They do it for
If
convenience,
it
brother.
doesn't have a seed, it doesn't have life.
No, run,
Okay,
run.
okay.
Yes.
Um, but
Honestly, I'll eat a seedless something every now and again. Before our watermelons come in, I might eat one seedless, but in general, they do it for convenience. But in the
sure.
end, there's something missing if the seeds aren't there.
Right. Because the
So,
seeds of life. It's
yep.
the genetic
Yep.
material
That
for new
thing
life,
can't
rebirth.
reproduce anything.
Right.
So you want to eat fruit with seeds and food
Okay.
in general with seeds.
All right. Well, look, food, fruit, whatever that has life in it as opposed
Yes.
to something that is lifeless. Well, listen, man, look, uh, let our listeners know where you are and how they can reach you. Website, telephone number if they want to talk with you, do a consult with you to improve their health so that they can have a new start on the new year.
Right. So it's Wisdom Path Healing Center. That's WISDOMPATH. And that's wisdompath.net. And our phone number is 301 891 2488. 301 891 2488. And if you want to catch me on my Instagram and see some farm stuff, it's at Dr. Farmer Brother, all spelled out. DOCTOR Farmer Brother. And yes, that's how you get in contact with me.
All right, well, cool. So we've been talking this hour with Dr. Amen, a brother who is someone very much connected to the soil, someone very connected to the people. And I do have to commend you, man. You gave one of the best interpretations of the solstice season that I've heard. It was grounded, it was short, it was sweet, and it encapsulated what this season is all about.
Right.
Preparing yourself for the rebirth of spirit and beginning the new year on the good foot, man. And I want to thank you also for bringing up at the top of this conversation, Dr. AJ. I'll call him Dr. AJ McKnight, Father
Yep.
McKnight, who used to bring me down to Opelousas, Lafayette, New Orleans, and Houston once a year for 3 or 4 years. Really beautiful soul. He was a former priest who was into food. He had a co-op,
Right.
and he struggled to bring consciousness to his people. That's what I remember.
Brother, I was part of one of the largest social experiments that happened because Father McKnight came in and he opened a supermarket,
Hmm.
food that was grown in the community. And he said that if a third of the church, Holy Ghost Catholic Church was the largest Black Catholic church in the nation because
Mm,
that area in Louisiana was all French Catholic Louisiana, right?
okay.
And it failed after 4 years. And Father McKnight quit preaching. He said, I am entertaining you Negroes. Y'all don't have the self-esteem to support each other. And he
And
quit
I
and
recall
started
one of the reasons why the co-op failed. And the church splintered was shortly after he had an artist come in and paint a picture of a black Jesus in the church.
Oh, brother, when he did that,
And Negroes ran from him like he was the devil. Yes, indeed. Thought he
yeah,
had
about
lost his
20%
mind.
of the church quit after that, brother.
Yes,
They
indeed.
didn't want
But
to.
but it really speaks to how our minds are controlled by people who don't have our best interests at
Right.
heart. And if they control the mind, they control the body. If they control the mind and body, they control your spirit and your soul.
Yes.
So if we wish to be free, if we wish to be healthy, we're going to have to begin to take back the knowledge that we were born with, the knowledge that's in our DNA, and come to know ourselves. Well, brother, look, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on this show. I'm glad I was able to get you on.
Thank you.
This month, we started off December on the good foot. And give that number and email address again. So I
It's
want to make sure that people have that information.
it's 301-891-2488. And the email is info@wisdompath.net.
And if you're driving down Maple Avenue in Takoma Park, it's the
Carroll,
purple
Carroll.
Carroll Avenue. I'm sorry, Carroll Avenue in Takoma Park. It's the Purple House. You can't miss it.
Yep,
And every
I've been
time I
here
see
for
the
a while.
brother, he's wearing all purple. So you know where his spirit is. You know where his heart is. Thank you so much, brother. Give my best to your wife and your family and your staff. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for your commitment to not only feeding our people, but making sure they get the best medical care possible so that they can live the best quality of life possible, brother. I appreciate you so much.
Same. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well.
All right, my pleasure. And I want to thank all of the listeners who have been supportive of the station. We're moving towards the end of the year, so there'll be numerous opportunities that you can give to this station and show your love, show your support. I just received an email today that there's going to be an open house on the 21st of this month. We invite you to come out and see the new digs, see the programmers, and have an opportunity to interact with the voices that you hear on the radio quite frequently. So it's been my honor to bring you this edition of the Browder File Show. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for supporting this station, and I urge you to continue to do so. Give to those who give to you. Support those who support you. And if you find that there's an individual, if there's an institution or organization that does not have your best interest at heart, turn your back on them. Support those who support you and give to those who will return to you what you've given tenfold. That is what life is all about. So make the most of the end of this year. I mean, I flipped the page on my calendar now, and another 12 months, another year gone. So let's do better in 2026, and it begins with you knowing yourself and loving yourself. Khalil, take us out with Maurice White, who gives us a message that it's all about love, and love begins with you. And if there ain't no beauty, you better make some beauty. Tony Browder out. I'll see you next week.
Learn all the beautiful things around.
Trees and birds, and if there ain't no beauty, you better make some beauty. Have mercy. Listen to me, y'all. Thank you, man. This